All right, I'd like to welcome Dr. Johansen from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I believe he's been at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab for 16 years. Is that about right?
Yeah.
And you work in the Advanced Numerical Algorithms group. Is that correct?
Sure. This feels like a deposition.
Introduction. And your research areas are applied math, of course, atmospheric science, computational theory and math, and numerical and computational mathematics.
Sounds good.
All right, I'd like to welcome Dr. Johansen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm down here in beautiful San Diego visiting friends and reached out because Chris has been spending summers, Professor Paolini has been spending summers up at Berkeley. So turns out that I'm here at the right time, apparently, so that's good. So I'm going to be talking about just complex things in the space of computational science. I hope, stop me and ask questions, okay? I know there's some early grad students, there are some professors who have no idea what I'm talking about, maybe. I just want to make sure that, this doesn't go over your head. And if there's anything you can get out of it, I would like to guarantee it. So this is our beautiful can you see? Oh, sorry, that's not where I was going. Here. So this is our beautiful supercomputing building overlooking the San Francisco Bay. That's San Francisco in the background. That's the Berkeley Campanile. What this picture doesn't show you is that the place where all the mathematicians are, of course, is the ugliest building on campus, right? As is almost always the case, except for here. This is a lovely facility. But our supercomputer there, it was number 7 in the world, then number 11. Now it's down to number 23, and it's only 5 years old, I think. Yes.
What do you mean by 7 or 23? What does that mean?
Number 7 in the compute capability in the entire world.
It's a ranking.
It's a ranking. It's a ranking called the top 500 supercomputers. Yes.
Down that will bring it back up to 1.
What will?
Down that.
Oh, Dudna. Yeah. Yeah. So there's going to be a brand new one, hopefully in the next year or two. This building's being upgraded for it. I actually joke that supercomputers have the shelf life of a banana because they're literally around for 5 or 6 years, and then somebody gets embarrassed by it falling down the rankings, and so they have to get a new one. I saw the new one out at Livermore. Lawrence Berkeley, by the way, is, for those of you who don't know, is not the weapons lab. It is a science lab. Lawrence Livermore is the weapons lab, and it's a different place, and they have the top, I think right now they have the top 2 supercomputers on the list, and they use them to simulate things that they couldn't do in real life, like explode nuclear weapons. So they're very big computers, and when they're done with them, guess what they do with them?
Auction them.
No, this one will get auctioned off or brought back. They destroy them. They literally shred them because they might have national security secrets on them, which makes me cry every time it happens.
Anyway,
all right. Anyway, so TLDR, does anybody know what that means?
Long didn't read.
Yeah, exactly right. So you can go after this if you want, right? But maybe this will keep your interest. I don't know. GPU supercomputers are amazing tools for simulation. I hope you get to use them. But they require really careful numerical software design. If you are a computational science person, you are using software. Well, hell, we all use software at this point, right? And the numerics of that is a really important consideration. So I'll give you my angle on it. And then most efficient results. I could run all kinds of things on a supercomputer that wouldn't produce any science results. There's no question that people do that every day. They just don't get called on it necessarily. So I'm going to make an argument as to what a valuable, efficient use of a supercomputer would be. And I've got a few sections. I know I'm talking to the computational science crowd, but I thought it might be interesting to see a couple of examples of things I've worked on. I work in particular on these kind of tricky numerics called embedded boundary discretizations, EB. And then I want to talk about high performance computing, HPC trends. We've got an alphabet, we've got acronym soup already, right? And what I think that means for how we might consider different kinds of algorithms and approaches. And then, of course, one of the reasons I'm here is I want to have an open door for collaboration, students, professors, science problems you're working on. How am I doing with the loud? Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so I have a grad student at Berkeley, a postdoc. My previous postdoc is now at AMD, enjoying his job there. Some collaborators at University of Virginia that just got a pretty big PSAP grant, if you've heard of that one, Department of Energy grant, like a $15 million grant for a facility at UVA, so that's awesome. And this is something you learn as you get funding. You have to always thank your funding providers. So there you go. We have, this is the group in Department of Energy, Advanced Scientific Computing and Research, OSCAR is what it gets called. And I've got math money and scientific discovery for advanced computation, or through advanced computation, and fast math, which is, again, more algorithm stuff. All right, so I'll speed this up a little bit. Here's an example of just a simple model of vortices interacting on what's called a cubed sphere. So you've got meshes that are laid down and they're dynamically moving to kind of track the interaction of those vortices. So this is something called adaptive mesh refinement. This actually, just a couple of weeks ago, it was in the news. They couldn't predict how two hurricanes in the Atlantic were going to interact. It is literally this problem. And if you look at most global simulation models for hurricanes, they're at such low resolutions that the hurricane only takes up like 5 or 6 cells. So they aggressively need adaptive mesh refinement, but it's just not what people use these days because the physics is so complicated. So this would be an example of something that's called a shallow water equation. This cube sphere is one discretization, and it's got these patches of refinement. But importantly, this is kind of a local time stepping. And how many of you know what Runge-Kutta schemes are? Okay, so RK4 is a 4th order accurate one. It tends to be the standard one that people use whenever they try things out. Yes.
Just wanted to ask how many dimensions? Is this 1, 2, or 3?
Oh, this is shallow water equation, so it's just 2.
So RK4 doesn't conserve energy.
A lot of things don't conserve energy, yes. So yeah, symplectic integrators and things like that to be considered. But sometimes one of the arguments that I'll make is a higher order accurate method will lose less energy than a low accurate method, and sometimes have better properties than one that does conserve energy. It very much depends. So anyway, you can tag these things based on, remnants of vorticity. These things would be effectively what just hit Northern California last week, which was a squall line, the remnants of a hurricane that was down in Mexico. So tracking these things can be very important for knowing rainfall and things that happen in climate. So here's just an example. This one's just a toy problem, honestly. You could do this on your laptop now. Here's one that's a little more complicated in manufacturing. So it's this really cool device where they actually are printing dentures and like soles for Nike shoes. I think it was Adidas was their partner. But what they have this resin, and then they have a mold that they're pulling up, out, and on the bottom is this UV light that exposes the shape they want in kind of like a flat layer slice. So 3D printing, but it's kind of more 3D solidification, drawing things up. So what's cool is that this is happening on these scales, 10 micrometers. They're printing things that are on the order of millimeters, 10 millimeters, whatever. Moving boundary chemistry, modeling the light as it transmits through the whole thing. This is a pretty complicated problem, but we were able to go after it again with adaptive mesh refinement and some other chemistry tricks that we use to get something to try to print the patterns. And they wanted to know how to make sure the pattern was what got printed, not some tweak of the pattern that looked wrong, right? Because if it's a denture, who wants their teeth to be wrong, right? So they were really trying to get the simulation to improve the precision of their printing abilities. Okay, here's another example of some of the big scale simulations. That's Antarctica, in case you didn't recognize it. This is a 500-year simulation of the ice sheets melting, driven by the heat from underneath them. And these jittery things are the same thing was on the adaptive mesh refinement before. And the finest spots are where the grounding line, which is where the ice goes from resting on the subsurface, so resting on the ocean floor basically, to floating. Once it's floating, it's in the ocean at sea level rise, right? So this was featured a couple of years ago because people forget that Antarctica is basically piled snow up on top of this archipelago, and it retreats really fast. So this could mean 10 meters of sea level rise in the next 100 years, which is, I hope it doesn't happen so aggressively, but I'm not going to buy coastal real estate in Florida. So, these are the kinds of really important questions that we try to go after with these numerical algorithms. All right, so I think, so in that particular case, it's a code that does kind of a 2D simplification, because Antarctica is huge, right? If you want to simulate it at 100-meter resolution, that's a lot of computing power. So they do these approximate models, things that look like partial differential equations for advection, things that look like these kind of like mechanics problems with viscosity and the height of the ice sheet kind of forcing its own flow from the differences of height and whether it's floating or not. And there's this kind of a gravity forcing and friction depending on whether it's floating or resting on the bottom. And it's basically a differential algebraic equation for those that know what it is. Another example where you take all this mathematics, you have to throw it into a computer simulation code, and then compare it to reality and satellite measurements and everything else. So one of my grad students took that code and said, well, there's so many sources of error here. Let's break it down into different bits and show that how much of the error is on that grounding line interface with this kind of toy model problem. So you can make a lot of errors there, and if you solve it mathematically correctly, you're smoothing those errors out over the whole problem and reducing them by a couple of orders of magnitude. And so you get something that would be maybe 1% error for what's starting to be an expensive calculation, but you get rid of all of that error, or even could do a much smaller calculation at the same error when you use a higher order method. So that means that as I refine the grid spacing, the errors go down very rapidly compared to something of a lower order, second order method. So my argument here is, if I'm doing something in 3D with a moving boundary, would I rather be doing 64 to the fourth or 512 to the fourth for the same error? That's a big difference. And he went on to show that this is one of the sub areas of that simulation, that you can do a very accurate representation of the ice flows using the same equations, just being more careful about the math that you put into it. And most people aren't willing to put in the effort for the math. They'll like throw it into a finite element library, hope for the best. But we're able to show that if you are very careful with this, you can actually make good progress. Okay, so sorry, and also like you're representing the grounding line as a sharp interface. So that kind of leads into the motivation for these embedded boundary approaches. All right, I'm happy to share the slides too, so you don't have to take pictures. So in general, what I want to say is so here are a bunch of applications. I've talked about, 2D vortices on the sphere, hurricanes, ice sheets, 3D printing, lots of different options. So first you come up with a mathematical model, and you usually do that. We were talking earlier about interdisciplinary discussions. You talk to a scientist and you say, what's the simplest mathematical model that has the features that you're looking for? And then you talk about how do you discretize that? How do you turn it into a series of mathematical concepts you can represent on a computer? And then you ask, all right, so is it even possible? Can I throw enough computing power at solving this? If somebody says, oh, just do chemistry with molecular dynamics, how many billions of atoms I'm going to need to represent? And then how heavy or difficult is the quantum mechanics, right? You got to make some simplification somewhere. So for that, you need to ask yourself early on what algorithms are actually going to work. So for me, my specialty is these interface representations. You've worked a little bit on EV too, right? Okay.
So
Right. So my colleague, David Trevetich, and Chris have worked together. David likes to do simple representations. I go for the complex stuff. It all works for different problems. The second thing is, now you've got the math you want to do. Now you've got to talk about the software, because bad software. Who here has run into bad software before? Who here has written bad software before? All right. So it's a pain, right? And some of it just comes out of necessity. I've got a deadline. I don't know what I'm doing. I can get an answer once. But then once you want to get answers at scale, it's a really bit. Are you trying to throw a little shade at somebody? Is that what that was? All right. Who has given bad software to other people? Those are the real evil people. Did you warn them at least, right?
No, better.
All right. Anyway, so the best is somebody's done the problem already, like Mol, for example. I work with different libraries. LAPACK, if people know LAPACK. Like DOE produces a lot of software libraries. We actually have a giant container package that you can download that has PETC and solvers like SuperLU and mesh generators and PowerMetis and all this. It's all in one big 40 gigabyte package, but it's all software that works together. So it might be a good starting place. So I'm going to make an argument that this AMR work and the cut cell work together, there aren't really good software packages for it, for the level of detail that I'm going into. So that's a second point of emphasis. And then lastly, I mentioned about wasting a supercomputer. So if you have a problem that you can solve without a supercomputer to the same accuracy, why would you waste the supercomputer, right? So using the right numerics and algorithms, you can actually squeeze these things down to small problems. And I'll talk a little bit about GPUs. Has anyone done GPU programming? Yeah, Chris, I think you're gonna raise your hand. You've done some GPU programming. Okay, these are really powerful devices. When you think about it, you're standing on the shoulder of, on the shoulders of giants. They've created these chips for machine learning and billion-dollar venture capital funds and all the possibility that the AI has for us. But the fact is, you can still buy these things, and if you can get your algorithm to run full speed on one of these chips, you're going to blow everything else away in terms of your performance and what you can get out of it. So now I need to go back and think about algorithms that run well on these chips. So our codes are actually starting to look a lot like artificial intelligence codes. Matrix multiplies, convolutions, all these terms that get used. And we use those a lot in our code. Okay, so that's the high level. Now I'm going to crank through because I've got about 20 minutes left. You want to wrap up around 3:40? 4:20 was it? Or 4:10? 4:10. Okay, 40-minute talk. Got it. All right, so I'll try to crank through. Oh, and last, and it's never done. You're always iterating through this cycle. Like, why isn't it running so fast? Oh, my algorithm sucks. Why am I not getting the accuracy I was expecting? Oh, I've got some misconceptions about the physics or the math or the discretizations. I have to write my own libraries. Okay, off we go. Let's write some libraries. So you're always iterating through the cycle, project after project. And if you're lucky, you get to reuse pieces. So I'm going to talk a lot about some of the pieces I get to reuse. So these cut cells, this is an example of a mesh. It's on the surface of a particular topological shape that we use to demonstrate how hard some of these networks of materials look. And this network was actually scanned. It's a bunch of carbon fiber and epoxy all kind of mishmashed together. Believe it or not, that's a major component in most batteries, certainly in a lot of fuel cell devices. So it's called carbon fiber paper, and they scan it. And can you imagine like manually making a mesh on something like this, right? No chance. You got to automate it. You've got to automate everything about it. And simulations can be really sensitive to mesh quality issues if you use finite element methods, for example. And so this was me taking that 3D thing, automatically turning it into a called a voxelated region, right? So it's got gaps now. You can see the gaps and the holes and the paths through the whole thing. So now you can start doing simulations on it. And I don't care about the quality of the mesh. I design algorithms that don't care about the quality of the mesh. Like over here, you can see maybe the small little triangles and stuff. Normally that would really screw up a simulation. And especially if you're trying to do something adaptive, this is running on 1,000 GPUs, and you can't have them all talking to each other all the time. That slows everything down. So if you can do this in a fast, local, kind of massively parallel way, that's great. But surface meshing is an open research problem. There's like a whole international meshing roundtable conference that happens every 2 years. It's happening again this spring about like, how do we do this better with better quality meshes? I try to stay away from it, because if you have just one bad element, it can sink your entire solver. So you just started up your supercomputer, you meshed the whole damn thing. It took 6 hours running there. And then you hit the solve part of your code and it goes like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do with this, right? I've got a bad mesh. And then somebody has to literally go in and debug it and try to figure out like how that's going. So I try to avoid those kinds of things and end with more robust algorithms that can just handle it. So that's my motivation for embedded boundaries. Now, whenever there are finite element people in the audience, normally they start raising their hands at this point, protesting just different tools for different problems, right? Okay. I think it's fussy and hard to automate. So finite volume methods are another technique where instead of kind of looking at a PDE in its form, you kind of integrate it over volumes, and you even integrate it over moving volumes. And when you do that, that's like anyone who's learned conservation laws in a physics class, that's how you originally derive it. And normally you go from there to there and get a PDE that is without a sense of a volume anymore. But you start off with some sense of conservation of mass, conservation of momentum, conservation of energy. So that's all I do for these cut cell algorithms is I put a box around things, And I'm just going to speed up a little bit. And you think about the fluxes that go in, the fluxes that go out, and the areas and the volumes and all these geometric quantities. And you just have to represent these things with enough fidelity that you're getting the order of accuracy you want. So the way I do that in finite volume land is I treat all of these individual cells like they're different degrees of freedom of a cell average quantity. And then you write out a bunch of obnoxious Taylor series math, and you end up with these things that look familiar, like a stencil for differences. Those are for a first derivative, for example, that are averaged over an edge here. And what you end up with is basically the sense that there are these volume moments. Instead of looking at point values for a Taylor series expansion, a point cloud, now you have like a volume cloud. I kind of know what the average is over here and over here. So shouldn't the difference of the averages give me some sense of the derivatives? So that's what a finite volume method does. But in this case, I get to actually start doing it for more complex geometries. I'll skip this, but basically there's a higher order equivalent, this Pth order method for the volumes. And you run it through this kind of flux view of things. And now you're looking at these average fluxes through the faces. And so instead of just this, now you're kind of looking more at this. You cut the geometry through your shapes. You do higher order methods. You incorporate boundary conditions along the boundary. And you end up with something where you've got these unknown polynomial coefficients. That's a function of all of the geometry that you know about and the averages of your solution. And that kind of like carries us through the entire method. But notice this is local, right? I'm not reaching all the way out here. This is just along the boundary. And in the middle of the domain, it looks like a traditional finite difference method. All the regular stencils that we learned for the Laplacian and stuff, those all apply. So basically I have like this thing that only is different on the boundary, and everywhere else I get to do the regular thing. And that's nice because I don't have to store a mesh. I just have to store like this relationship with neighbors and just near the boundary. Okay, doesn't matter. TLDR, right? Okay, so with some examples, you can get very high order accurate methods. You can have relatively complex geometries and flows. You can get very high order accuracy if you're careful about it. You can do free surface problems much better. And you still maintain this like error versus grid size convergence rates very aggressively. So, you know, here again, 2 digits for coarse grids. If you want 6 digits, you still aren't going aggressively up into the 500,000 kind of grid point range. And so you can get much better conversions for certain kinds of problems. The boundary has to be fairly smooth for me to be successful though, or I have to know exactly where the not smooth parts are. So there's a lot of work there. All right, so high order methods, making this argument about, you know, these slowly converging methods with grid spacing or the number of points, faster converging methods for higher order, and this kind of equivalence that you can see where if you want a low accurate method, fine, start there. But if you want high accuracy, which you need for a lot of problems, right? Long time integrations, things with really steep gradients or reaction features or things that are creating issues. And so then why not go to a higher order method that's going to start you off at a better spot, and you can then see that you don't need more accuracy to answer your science question, that you're doing fine up here. Whereas out here, you've already wasted half the supercomputer trying to chase something that's not accurate enough yet. Okay, so I don't know if, should I skip some of the computer science topics? I don't know if anyone's interested. This is a roofline model. If you've not heard of one, who's heard of a roofline model? Okay, I'm not going to go into it then because it takes a little bit of mind bending to go. Really fast, performance on the vertical axis. How many flops am I getting out of this simulation code? And a flop is a computation like a multiply or an add. Look at the numbers here, 125 teraflops. Right? What 10 to the 9th, right? No, 10 to the 12th. 10 to the 12th, sorry. It's insane, it's mind bending. And that's all from one, this is a vintage now 8-year-old V100 GPU. But how you read this is that along this line, whatever you're doing is taking the same amount of time. Here, it's limited by how much data it can get. Here, it's limited by how fast it can do the computations. Those are 2 different things. I'm waiting for data to come, or I'm waiting for the computation to finish. And you can try to overlap them, but at some point, one of them is going to beat you out. All right, so that's the kind of speed of light for these chips. And if you're looking at what we do in our field, this is a sparse matrix vector multiply. You're completely sucking wind down here. You cannot handle, you're not using half You're not using 99 or more % of this chip. All you're doing is taking memory, pairing them up, memory, pairing them up, right? That's the slowest thing you could possibly do. There's no reuse. Finite difference stencils, you're in this space. If it's a big stencil, you can start to get over here where you're moving a little memory and you're doing a lot of redundant computation on it. It's not necessarily redundant, but you're reusing the data. And then finally, if you're doing machine learning kind of things, they're all the way out here. And that's where you're up in the space of reduced precision, floating point 16, super fast operations, and you're multiplying buckets of matrices together all at once really fast all the time. It's not the way a lot of our codes look though, but we can use those kinds of algorithms to speed them up. B100, 6 years, now we've got an H100 that are in these supercomputers, and we've gotten a lot of speed up in 6 years for this particular chip, mostly because they've just got more transistors and smaller transistors. But there are more and more chips coming out all the time. Every year, NVIDIA comes out with a new chip. AMD says, oh, we better come out with a new chip too. Some startup wants $2 billion to make another new chip. There's one called Cerebrus that is this big and costs something like 42 million. I can't remember, but it's really fast, right? But it's one big chip the size of a wafer. So keeping up with all of that change is really hard. So the point of this is to say, know where your algorithm sits on this scale and whether you're wasting the processor capability, because that's what you're leaving on the table. And at the 20x difference. I'm going to skip over this precision argument, but does anybody know about different precisions? Double precision, single precision is the starting point. A lot of machine learning algorithms are going down to 4-bit precision. It's like you can barely represent an opinion of 4 people with 4 bits, right? But they're just using massively large chunks of data of 4 bits, but they go much faster.
Why are they doing that? What's the value of that?
Because if you do a matrix multiplication, I did skip this, but the matrix represented in let's just pick 16-bit, okay, is 4 times smaller than one represented in double precision, right? And then when you multiply it with another matrix, that's also 4 times smaller. And you can load more of it into a register and then chew on that entire register in 1 instruction or 2 instructions, because each of the multiplies you're doing is now multiplying 2 little things as well. So basically, it's like a factor of 8 magnification immediately, sometimes 16 if you then can say truncation and other stuff. And they just squeeze it into 1 instruction and they build super small sets of transistors that can do it, basically. And that's what machine learning is, right? It's like taking these matrices of data, multiplying, by weights, running them through biases, out comes the answer for the next layer. So they've got to do this over and over and over again to do inference, for example. This is another technique for trying to minimize communication. You look at the region you want to communicate with your neighbors, you lay it out in a way that is the communication oriented, not in these lines that we typically use for like I loop, J loop, K loop, right? That means that when you want to talk from here to here, you have to load a lot of memory, ignore most of it, or use it once, and then reload it again later. So it's called, this approach is called tiling, or bricks in this case. I use a lot, and it eliminates a lot of communication overheads. Here's another roof line. Just basically, if you're doing low order versus high order, remember what I said this line was on the roof line? That's the speed of light. It's all the same amount of time. So again, more flops, I get more accuracy. I'm up in this corner. Fewer flops, lower accuracy, I'm down here. It's the same amount of time. I'm just using more of the processor's capabilities. And it can be a factor of 10 in performance, and then I get another 6 digits of accuracy. It's pretty good combination, right? So bricks, tiles, cut cells. I wrote some software basically with my collaborators. It's called HashBrick. My actually code is called Amoeba, adaptive mesh. I'm sorry, I forget what the acronym stands for. I should learn that. But it allows us to treat these things as this big database of geometric information. What level of refinement, what's connected to what, helps the geometry stuff happen a lot faster. This is just kind of more software library stuff. Batch solvers are a fast way. I don't solve one system, go back, solve another system, go back, solve another system. I take them all, stack them up, and I solve 1,000 at a time. And if they're all the same size, then again, the GPUs are well set up to just go ka-chunk, and here comes the answer out all at once. So that's a totally different mindset to how we do things looping wise when you don't have a GPU. GPU says set it all up. I don't know. It's like putting a bunch of Doritos in with a bunch of kindergartners and just watching the kind of, tear the bags open and eat them all or something. It's different than like everyone sitting down, going through the buffet line, right? It's literally like it all gets eaten all at once and it comes back and says, ta-da, it's done. We have another concept of sparse matrices. Remember how I said, oops, sorry, how this is an exception. It only happens near the boundaries. If you look at a typical sparse matrix, all this stuff would be filled in with neighbor interactions. Those are gone, right? That's all just regular grid stuff. So now all we have to do is keep track of the sparse part of the sparse matrix. So it's a sparse matrix. And what that allows us to do is really compress it down. It's funny, I walked in here and I saw all the bit twiddling layouts on the walls. It's literally, I spend a good chunk of my time bit twiddling, but I try to write that in software. And so now I have all of this stuff compressed down to a very small amount of memory. And again, that pushes me further into where the GPU can chew through the matrix much faster. So we use all kinds of techniques and tricks like that. I gotta skip this. This is basically more calculations of geometric refinement. We do that in order to get very high order and accurate representations of the boundary. We can detect where kinks are, zoom in around the kinks, get the geometry information of that. I call this the underpants convergence test. Basically, you get 1 order of accuracy or 4th order of accuracy without a lot of additional work if you use a good algorithm that converges with this refinement process. If you want 8 digits versus, if you worked really hard subdividing with the wrong algorithm, you'd get 5 digits. But using the right algorithm with just a few refinements, you can get 8 digits. So it's a big difference when you use the right algorithms. All right, so opportunities for collaboration. I'm going to wrap up now. These are things I'm working on, and then I'm going to mention like everything that we have going on inside of the DOE and LBL for collaboration. And Chris has taken advantage of some of the summer research project stuff before. Eric Berzua, he was in this group, wasn't he? Yeah, a while ago. He was my summer student for a summer graduate student research project. So, we're open to, and then of course, I didn't really co-advise, but Sasa Kirchik was a master's in physics that just graduated. So we try to keep the academic connections there because, honestly, we don't want just a bunch of people aging into the workforce. You can tell this is innovative stuff. We need young people with exciting research ideas that are really looking forward to kind of establishing a computational science career. So things I'm working on, in case any of these ring a bell, machine learning is all the rage right now. Honestly, I can't get funding without mentioning machine learning. It's kind of crazy. It's really hard to do just straight up math. Education, I can still get some funding for, but machine learning on its own adapted to the science problems. So what do? Do I stop solving PDEs? Is that gone? We done with that? We figured that one out? I can go home? So anyway, what I've been doing is saying like, okay, machine learning will give you an answer, but part of the theme today has been, it's not a great answer. I can get like 5–10% accuracy if the machine learning algorithm is working well, and it gives me garbage if it's wrong. I don't think we want that in like a heart monitor, right? Or, a pacemaker. We don't want it kind of going like, oh, I'm close 10%, right? So what I've been doing is taking PD solutions that are more accurate, machine learning solutions that aren't as accurate, and combining them together in ways that expose more of this parallelism. They run faster. I can fix the mistakes that the machine learning algorithm is doing. So I'm working on research around that. And in particular, like if you're doing like a really big complex optimization problem, having a good first guess is really important. That saves you a lot of time, iterations, false minima. If you've heard of that local minima where you're searching for the best design, it's like, no, that's not it. Sorry, go fish. Parallel and time algorithms. Another one is so RK4. How many people have written their own time stepping algorithm? Like, now's the solution. Now's the next solution. Do you have a numerical time integration class of some kind, or somewhere in there?
Well, we use different, galactics.
Okay, different things. Anyway, so PDEs in time need a time evolution. And that means that the previous time step is the required thing that has to be finished before the next time step. If I'm taking 1 billion time steps, I have lost the ability to take 1 billion different things and parallelize over it. So there's a whole set of research algorithms that says, I'm going to take a horrible guess for 1 billion time steps. But now I know how wrong it is. If I can measure how wrong it is, I can go back and start fixing it. And maybe I can fix parts of it in parallel. And then maybe I can do that iteratively. So you just exposed 1 billion times more parallelism in your algorithm, not just cutting things up in space, but also splitting it up in time. So I'm excited about that. It's the first time I've seen like novel mathematical algorithms come back into the field in a while. And it's a nice community too. They're really nice and open for things. On the flip side, plasma discharge for medium voltage switchgear. This is the stuff that's like connecting wind turbines to the grid, or that is a solar farm has to connect to the grid, right? Or even just, big industrial applications. They got to be able to shut this stuff on and off. Turns out that the gas that they put in this switchgear is sulfur hexafluoride, which is 1,000 times more potent a greenhouse gas than methane. And methane's already 20 times more potent than CO2. So this is bad stuff. But they've designed, the entire industry is designed around sulfur hexafluoride. Have you ever had a physics professor that will do the helium and then go, talk in a high voice? Okay, sulfur hexafluoride makes your voice really low like that. It's the opposite. It's a super heavy gas. It's not conductive. It's perfect for insulating gas chambers. But they got to get rid of it now and find alternatives, which means they've got to redo all of their designs, which means they should do simulation to cut down on the physical cost of redesigning all these things. So I'm doing that. But it's interesting because it's plasma discharge, which happens on micrometer levels, and these devices are on the level of meters. So 6 orders of magnitude difference of scale. Software hash based. So hashes are fundamental of databases and lookup tables and all this stuff. This is that GPU library I was telling you I was working on for embedded boundaries. I still do mathematics. Proving some of these things are numerically stable is hard. So I've got a grad student working on that right now. He's like classic, proof, lemma, assumptions, that's the kind of math he wanted to do, but it fits into what we do because I want this stuff to be robust in theory, but I also in practice want it to be robust as well. And I'm always looking for science collaborations. I love what you said earlier about, the interdisciplinary nature of the program here, where you try to connect mathematicians, numerics people with science problems. And then over here is a long list. You probably read it already while I was yabbering, but for graduate fellowships, you don't have to have this. I think you can apply for it even in your second year as a grad student. So the DOE CSGF is a really nice gig. It's full tuition, stipend beyond that, travel stipends, summer practicum at the DOE labs. I just had a great summer student from Princeton who came in for that. We also just do regular old summer student faculty summer research projects. There's a great postdoc for any of you that are graduating with your PhDs called the Alvarez Fellow or the Grace Hopper Fellow. Those are kind of applied mathematics or computational science and computer science postdoc positions at the lab. Very highly regarded. There's this kind of community of people around those. Sometimes we'll do joint university DOE funded things. I don't know if you have any of those going right now. There's this open call for many hundreds of millions of dollars right now, topics from Oscar. Maybe we can talk about that. I can't lead it as a LBL person, but I can join a university fund. So anyway, so that's all I have. I wanted to, thanks. I hope it wasn't too boring. I hope the TLDR didn't live up to just that. And I have a lot of great colleagues. I have some not so great colleagues too, but I have a lot of great colleagues, collaborators, and definitely the funders. And I always have to thank NERSC for their access to the supercomputer that they provide and the next ones too. So thank you. Thanks for having us. I just went to a beatnik party, so I appreciate the snaps.
It's actually beatnik applause
Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
old enough to remember that stuff, which I am.
All right, that was a lot. So any questions or thoughts or yeah.
Yeah. how much do you use AMD GPUs? And, well, whatever you do, but in Berkeley Lab, I mean, is it like 100 NVIDIA GPUs to every one of the AMD GPUs, or
So the way the supercomputing centers work,
say that again?
the way the supercomputing centers work is they have one vendor usually. And so Berkeley Lab has NVIDIA and Livermore has 3 AMD machines right now. So I write code that works there. I try to write it so it works on both, but you can't always do that.
So, but if you transition your code over to Lawrence Livermore, would it melt the brains of the grad students working there? Or?
I would not burn a grad student on porting my code to AMD. And AMD knows this. AMD knows that they're losing market share to NVIDIA. So now, trying to remember, they have for everything that NVIDIA has as a software library, AMD has something that's named just a little different. Like
It's a little slower.
no, it's just named different.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
I understand.
But it does almost because it's not illegal to copy an API for software. So if I have a linear algebra library, I can have it be the same exact software signature, but I can't copy the software that they use. I have to rewrite it myself, but I can copy the signature, which means my code will run exactly on those machines if that's available.